It's now time for the second part of our departure whistle. It is 3 short blasts, and once again, cover your ears.
Pretty exciting. I know.
Oh, yes.
I think that I've been around since I first saw him.
That's what they asked. I said, I don't know. I'm on a boat.
I'm not, and I'm not the captain.
We're not in a house. We're on a boat. We want to talk to the captain.
Yeah.
Funny.
Actually, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard the riverboat Mark Twain. We're presently headed upbound or northbound, and you're on the Mississippi River. And while we're out here today, I'm going to try to point out to you some of the different sites along the waterfront of Hannibal. If during the trip you have a question, feel free to ask any member of our crew. Down on the main deck in the concession area, we have Joni there to serve you today. Deck crew on board. Let's see, we got John and we got Jordan. I'm Captain Steve. I'll be in the pilot house and on the microphone. So if you have a question, feel free to ask one of us. We'll be sure to make up a real good answer for you. First thing, look up ahead of us there on top of the hill. You see the top, at least the top half of that small white lighthouse. This lighthouse is not an official aid to navigation. It's a tribute to Hannibal's most famous citizen, Mark Twain. The original lighthouse was erected in 1935 on the 100th anniversary of Mark Twain's birth. Used to be a lady who lived atop this hill by the name of Holiday. Her husband was a steamboat pilot. She kept a light burning in the window at night for the steamboats as they plied the river. Her husband was killed in a steamboat accident. When Mark Twain wrote The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, he referred to her as the Widow Douglas. Directly to our left, we have the Hannibal Boat Club, built up high like this, not for the view, but to stay out of the reach of floodwaters. When it was originally built, it sat a lot closer to the ground. We had a flood, it got wet, and it had to be rebuilt. They thought they had built it high enough that it would never flood again. But the flood of 1993 put 2 feet of water inside the building, and that's because the flood of 93, well, it topped out almost 20 feet higher than the river is right now. And that put 50 passengers. Okay, now get your cameras ready, because in about 15 seconds or so, if you look directly to the left and up atop the hill, you're going to get a much better view of that lighthouse. It's actually a photo quality view of the lighthouse on Cardiff Hill. Coming up on our left, we have the old concrete structure next to the water's edge. Across the tracks is another concrete structure, and somebody's been very busy with the spray paint. These foundations, along with a handful of family members, are all that remain of the store's ice and coal company. They used to harvest ice on the river. They'd come out on the ice with teams of horses. They would saw out huge blocks of ice. Then it was towed back into these buildings where it was stored in straw and sawdust and preserved for the warmer summer months ahead. At which time it was sold to the railroads, the riverboats, and the very wealthy in town who could afford this luxury. With the invention of modern refrigeration, there was no longer a need for river ice. So many ice houses like this up and down the river went completely out of business. This particular family went into the appliance business, and they sold GE appliances in the Hannibal area until about 1980. Up ahead of us, well, we got a couple bridges crossing the river. Got some great blue herons flying around here today. We'll see more of them later, I'm sure. The 2 bridges. The first one is the Mark Twain Memorial Highway Bridge. It's a 4-lane structure that connects Interstate 72 in Illinois with Highway 36 in Missouri. It was opened on September 16th of the year 2000, after about 5 years of construction. They tell us it only cost $51.5 million to build it. Further upstream is the old Wabash train and wagon bridge. It was built in 1871 at a cost of $1 million. And it is the second oldest structure to cross the upper Mississippi. Barges and towboats close up later in our trip. Now they primarily take on wheat, corn, soybean, and milo. Time for us to make a turn to head downstream. If we were to continue going upstream against the current, traveling a distance of 66 miles. It's going to take us at least 18 hours, probably longer, but we get to a town called Nauvoo, Illinois. You can drive there in 90 minutes. Heading downstream, going with the current, traveling 128 miles. In 24 hours, we could be looking at the Gateway Arch in St. Louis. Drive time to the arch is 2 hours and 30 minutes, provided you don't run into a lot of traffic when you get into the city. Also, as we make our turn, if you look back at the highway bridge, on the bridge pier you see numbers. As the numbers go up the pier, they get smaller. These numbers are telling us the amount of clearance we have underneath the bridge. Showing us today 60 feet. You're required right at 40.
Feels good out here. Oh yeah. Oh yes. On the Mount of Mist. Yes.
We passed back by the Hannibal waterfront. Over to our right, you see our landing, and on the downstream side of our landing is the Hannibal Small Boat Harbor. This was built back in 1958. It's used today mostly by the local folks. Now, before it was built, it was cobblestones into the water, and this is where the steamboats would land when they came to town. In the 1840s and 50s, there were times when we had as many as 10 steamboats show up in a day. And it was a big deal for the folks in town, especially for the young men who lived here, for many of them dreamed of becoming steamboat pilots. Now, a few of them realized the dream. Most famous from Hannibal was Sam Clemens, who got his pilot's license April 9, 1859. Off ahead of us there, slightly to the right, we've got a large, long, flat area that runs downstream along the bluff for better than a mile. This is what's left of the Burlington Railroad Yards. Used to be one of the busiest railroad yards in northeast Missouri. They would switch hundreds of cars every day here. They got tired of being flooded every spring, so they moved 17 miles north to higher ground, where they flooded in '93. Now, overlooking that old railroad yard is a tree-covered bluff with a rather unique rock formation protruding out towards the river. Well, here in Hannibal, we call this Lover's Leap. And if you were to travel up and down the river, you would find many bluffs, or cliffs, or ledges like this. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to be known as Lover's Leap. Hannibal's Leap, however, is authenticated by an old Indian legend. And I'm going to share that legend the way it was told to me by an old riverboat pilot named Captain Harold Esky. Told me this story 41 years ago, way back in 1977. Seems that many, many years ago, we had 2 tribes of Indians that lived in the area. The Fox on the Missouri shore and the Illini over in Illinois. These nations of Indians were at war and would have probably annihilated each other had it not been for the big water that separated them. In the Fox tribe, there was a beautiful Indian maiden, princess, daughter of the chief, who was known far and wide for her beauty. And each evening around sunset, she'd sit atop that ledge and watch the river go by. Well, one evening as she was seated up there, she saw a canoe put out from the Illinois shore. A young Illini brave again. These nations of Indians were at war, and she had disgraced him in the eyes of his tribe by associating with the enemy. Well, the young princess disobeyed her father. She snuck out of camp and continued to meet the brave atop that rock. One evening, as she was leaving camp, the wise old chief just happened to spot her. He followed her to that ledge and found her in the arms of her lover, the brave he'd forbidden her to see. This enraged the old gentleman so much, he pulled an arrow from his quiver, he placed it in his bow, and he aimed directly at his only daughter's heart. The young brave, acting quickly, grabbed the young maiden in his arms. They ran to the edge of that ledge, took one last look, and they jumped. But as luck would have it, they landed atop a northbound Burlington freight train. They rode the train to Keokuk, Iowa, where they opened up a trading post. They made $1 million, had a dozen kids, and lived happily ever after. Well, if you look over to the left, now that's the port side of the boat if you want to be nautical. We've got a mainline towboat tied off out here to the anchor fleet. And this towboat's very typical of the towboats you find working the river above St. Louis. He'll be leaving here with 14 barges. He'll have all empties. Measures 105 feet wide, almost 1,200 feet long. Makes him as long as anything you're going to find on the Great Lakes, longer than most ocean-going vessels. They're actually longer than the largest aircraft carrier in the Navy. Now, each one of the barges measures 195 feet long, 35 feet wide, 12 feet deep, 100 feet deep.
Wow.
Back in the days when Sam Clemens was a pilot, if they wanted or needed to know how deep the water was, they had a man called a leadsman who would stand on the bow of the boat or in a skiff ahead of the boat, and he would drop a weighted line or a pole into the water. And this line or pole was marked off every 6 feet. If they had 2 marks go in the water, he would holler to the pilot, "Mark Twain." The pilot aboard the vessel then knew they had at least 12 feet of water to run through, and this was considered safe water for their boats. Sam Clemens was on the river for 4 years. First 2 years as an apprentice, last 2 as the pilot in command. He did all of his steamboating between St. Louis and New Orleans. Long into the 4th year of his steamboat career, The Civil War got close to the Mississippi, and they started to shoot at the steamboats. Well, Sam Clemens was not particularly fond of being shot at, so he left the river, and he went on to do other things. He continued to write, and it was the fashion in those days to use a pen name or an alias. Well, he chose the river term that he'd learned while on the Mississippi, the term that means safe water. He chose the name Mark Twain. He used this name as he lectured in the United States and abroad, and also as he wrote the book, for which he's now famous. And you'll find that they have tour guides that can give you the facts and history. Mark Twain Cave is an easy 55-minute walking tour. It's electrically lit, and they tell us it's 52 degrees once you're inside. Cameron Cave is Missouri's newest show cave. It's an hour and 20-minute tour, about 56 degrees, and if you want to see in there, you have to carry one of their lanterns. Back in the old days, this was known as Cave Hollow Landing. The steamboats pushed in here. They let their passengers off to picnic in the area of the cave while they took on wood. Arcade games, another fun thing. They have shopping and they have the snack bar. Off ahead of us there, to the right, floating in the water, got a green barrel standing on it, called a can boy, marking the right side of the channel as we go downstream. We use a system that includes green can boys, red nun boys, with day marks, crossing marks, mileage boards, paper charts, and now we even have electronic charts in order to navigate safely on the river system. Further on downstream, a little better than a mile, we got some silos next to the water tank. This is the barge loading facility for the top. Bulk of the plant's actually behind the hill. At one time, it was the third largest producer of cement in the world. Now they go back into the hills, they take out the limestone and the shale. It's heat treated, it's pulverized, and it is converted into Portland cement, which is the finest quality that you can purchase. Then shipped. That's in the Hannibal area. Time for us to make our turn to head back upstream. We're going to cross the imaginary dotted line down the center of the river channel that separates the states of Missouri and Illinois. We'll head back up on the Illinois side, and in just a little bit, well, I'm going to tell you about some islands.
You all good? You need anything?
I'm all good right now.
CJ, you enjoying it?
Yeah.
Is it good?
Oh yeah.